I need to tell you something that might sound almost like heresy to many. Psalm 23, the one you've probably heard at funerals, services, and even in films, is not just about faith, it's about money. Yes, about prosperity. And no, I'm not saying God is an ATM. What I'm saying is that this psalm holds a mental code which, when understood and lived, changes not only what you believe, but also what you possess. And you know the most intriguing part? This code is so powerful that, if applied today, it can transform your bank balance, your peace of mind, and the legacy you will leave behind. When I say, "I shall not want," I'm not talking about a pretty phrase to put in a frame on the wall or in a social media status. I mean a deep mental command, a declaration that, when truly believed, changes the entire course of your life. That is the difference between those who live at the mercy of circumstances and those who build their own story. Most people repeat these words as if they were a charm, but deep down they continue to nurture the belief that they are not capable, that they do not deserve, and that something will always be missing. It is like trying to fill a bucket full of holes. No matter how much effort you make, everything escapes through fear and insecurity. I have learned that the mind is the soil where you plant the seeds of your future, and that every thought is a seed that sooner or later germinates. When you repeat with conviction, "I shall not want," you are watering the soil of your mind with confidence. You are telling yourself and the universe, "I choose to believe in abundance even when the external scenario seems to say otherwise." It is not self-deception, it is programming. It is training the brain to seek solutions instead of problems, to see opportunities where others only see closed doors. Often people ask me, "But Napoleon, how can I say I shall not want if the bills are overdue, the salary does not last until the end of the month, and life is a mess?" I answer, precisely because of that. Because if you only believe when everything is fine, that is not faith, that is convenience. True strength comes when you decide to sustain that certainty, even amidst scarcity. That is when you start to reprogram your subconscious, because it does not distinguish between what is real and what is deeply believed. I remember a period in my life when it seemed that everything was against me. Projects cancelled, debts accumulating, friends drifting away. No outsider would say I had any reason to believe in prosperity, but every morning before getting out of bed, I mentally repeated, "I shall not want." At first it seemed a weak whisper, almost lifeless. Over time, this phrase began to gain weight, voice, and strength within me. And it was precisely at that time that ideas began to emerge, people started to appear, doors began to open. Not because the world magically changed, but because I changed inside and started to act like someone who does not fear lack. When you think like a winner, you act like a winner. And when you act like a winner, results start to appear. Modern neuroscience studies show that the intentional repetition of affirming phrases charged with emotion creates new neural connections, strengthening behavior patterns that attract more opportunities. In other words, what scientists now prove, I and many others have already lived in practice. Your external life is a reflection of your internal life. Think with me, how many times have you avoided making an investment, accepting a proposal, or starting a project simply because you thought, "What if there is not enough?" This scarcity mindset is like driving with the handbrake on. You try to move forward, but you do not get far. Now imagine living with the conviction that nothing will ever be lacking. Would that not make you bolder? Would it not increase your willingness to take calculated risks? Would it not broaden your vision of what is possible to achieve? I'm not talking about ignoring responsibilities or living in illusions. I'm talking about creating a mental foundation so solid that even when challenges arise, and they always do, you do not falter, you do not retreat, you do not become paralyzed. "I shall not want" is more than a biblical verse. It is a philosophy of life that shapes decisions, attracts resources, and awakens a strength that you might not even know you have. Perhaps today you are in a moment of uncertainty, looking at the coming days and wondering how you will manage everything. And it is precisely now that you need to say with every fiber of your being, I shall not want. Because when this certainty takes root within you, fear loses control and courage arises in its place. Clarity and creativity are essential to finding paths where once there were only walls. I can assure you, this is the key that separates those who merely survive from those who truly prosper. There is a detail in Psalm 23 that few notice. After declaring, I shall not want, the psalmist says, He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, and He leadeth me beside the still waters. These words conceal a principle that transforms the way you work, decide, and even how money comes to you. True prosperity does not arise from haste or anxiety. It blossoms in the calm of a clear and focused mind. When I interviewed some of the most successful men of my era, I observed a surprising pattern. They did not live in constant rush, nor did they make hasty decisions. On the contrary, they cultivated a strategic serenity, a type of tranquility that was not laziness, but mastery. We live in an age where people confuse motion with progress. They believe that being busy all the time means advancing, but in reality, they are merely wearing themselves out. The market, the media, and even family culture push us to act as if every decision is urgent, as if the opportunity will evaporate within seconds. But decisions made in haste carry a very high cost. And I am not speaking only of money. According to studies by the Harvard Business Review, acting under constant pressure drastically increases the likelihood of errors, especially in financial and strategic decisions. Haste clouds the mind, and when the mind is clouded, the opportunity can pass unnoticed even when it stands before your eyes. I learned this the hard way myself. Years ago, I received an investment proposal that seemed irresistible. There was an atmosphere of now or never, and everyone insisted I sign on the very same day. But something inside me said to wait. I took a deep breath and asked for 2 days to think it over. During that interval, I accessed information that revealed hidden clauses that could have led me to bankruptcy. That calm decision saved not only my capital, but also my credibility. And it was then that I realized that calm is not passivity. It is strategy. The green pastures of the psalm represent a place of safe rest, but it is not the rest of one who has given up. It is the rest of one who knows where they are and where they are going. The still waters symbolize a mind without the noise of doubt and comparison. When you are in this state, your reasoning is sharper, your perception broader, and your actions more accurate. It is precisely in this space of balance that the most profitable ideas and the wisest decisions emerge. Unfortunately, most people do not know how to reach this state. They wake up late, immediately check their phones filled with bad news and social media full of comparisons, and begin the day carrying a huge mental burden. With such a mind, how can clarity be expected? It is like trying to see the bottom of a turbulent lake. The image is distorted. But when you still the waters, everything becomes clear. I advise creating small daily rituals to silence the excess. It might be waking up earlier to spend a few minutes in silence, walking without distractions, or even writing down everything on paper that is passing through your mind before starting work. These habits reduce the internal noise and allow you to make decisions more aligned with your purpose rather than external pressure. People who cultivate this practice tend to act more intentionally. And the curious thing is that when you stop chasing everything, it seems the right things start chasing you. That is why great achievers do not let themselves be carried away by the frantic pace of the world. They do not act to prove anything to anyone. They act because they have clarity. They know that consistent results do not come from uncontrolled bursts of effort, but from firm and conscious steps. When you learn to rest in trust, as the psalm says, anxiety loses its strength, and in its place comes the conviction that every movement happens at the right time. Perhaps today you live like someone who feels compelled to do everything at once, trying to grasp every opportunity for fear of losing out. But what if the true loss is exactly not stopping to think, not stilling the mind, not allowing ideas to mature? It is counterintuitive. But in my experience, slowing down to listen to yourself and to what is greater than you is what accelerates results most in the long term. Calm is not a luxury. It is the fuel for decisions that truly generate prosperity. There is a moment in Psalm 23 that for me is the most challenging of all. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. This phrase does not speak of times of prosperity. There are times when everything seems to be falling apart. This is not a promise that you will avoid difficulties, but rather the certainty that you will get through them without being destroyed. This is one of the hardest and at the same time most liberating truths I have learned on my journey. The valley is not optional. It is part of the path. Many people imagine success as a straight line, but after decades of studying the journeys of the greatest achievers in the world, I discovered that every single one of them faced deep valleys. Some went through bankruptcies, others experienced devastating personal losses, serious illnesses, rejections, or public humiliations. The difference between those who cross the valley and those who remain trapped in it forever is not the severity of the challenge, but the attitude towards it. Here is where the element that separates destiny builders from survivors comes into play: leadership over fear. Fear is a powerful force. It paralyzes, distorts perception, and often makes us give up before even trying. I myself faced a valley so dark that for several months the temptation to stop and accept defeat was almost irresistible. I had dedicated years to an ambitious project, and when everything was about to succeed, a series of setbacks completely knocked it down. I saw resources evaporate, partnerships dissolve, and felt the overwhelming pressure of being seen as a failure in the eyes of others. It was at that moment that I remembered the most valuable lesson I learned from those I interviewed. Fear only wins when you give it the last word. I decided to keep going, not because I had guarantees it would work, but because I knew that giving up there would mean burying not only that project, but also my confidence. With every step, I repeated to myself, even in the valley, I move forward, and it was curious to notice that as I kept moving, the fear lost strength. It did not disappear, but it stopped being the driver of my actions. Throughout my career, I encountered similar stories. Thomas Edison, after hundreds of failed attempts, said he had not failed, only discovered ways that did not work. Henry Ford experienced bankruptcies before creating an empire. Walt Disney was rejected by dozens of banks before securing funding for his projects. They all had valleys. They all had fear, but none of them allowed fear to decide for them. Science confirms this connection between courage and progress. Research on resilience shows that people who keep acting even in uncertain situations are significantly more likely to find creative solutions to problems. It is as if the act of moving forward itself opens invisible doors that remain locked for those who stop halfway. The valley of the shadow can take different forms for each person. For some, it is a time of financial crisis. For others, an unexpected diagnosis, the loss of a loved one, or a painful professional failure. And it is in this environment that the mind begins to create ghosts. What if it doesn't work? What if I lose everything? What if I can't handle it? But here is the point. Shadow only exists where there is light. If there is shadow on your path, It means that the light is still present, even if it seems distant. When the psalmist says, "I will fear no evil," he is not claiming to be insensitive to danger. He is saying that he chooses not to be governed by it. It is a conscious decision to keep his eyes on what is beyond the valley, not just on what lies before him. And when you do this, something changes in your attitude. You stop acting like a victim of circumstances and start acting as the protagonist of your story. Perhaps today you are facing a valley so dark that it is hard to believe in crossing it. Perhaps you have already thought about postponing that project, declining that opportunity, or even giving up on a dream you have carried for years just to avoid more frustration. But what if what is missing is not more certainty but more courage? What if what you call prudence is just fear in disguise? Remember, the valley is not the end. It is the bridge between where you are and where you need to be. The crossing may be tough, but the promise remains intact. Those who keep moving, even in uncertainty, discover strengths and resources they never imagined possessing. And it is at this point that fear ceases to be a prison and becomes fuel to go beyond. When the psalmist says, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for many days," he is not only talking about a distant future or a heavenly place. He is describing a state of life, a way of living that consistently bears fruit, a level of prosperity that extends far beyond the bank balance. It is as if he is stating, "What follows me is greater than what I pursue." This is one of the greatest keys to understanding the difference between momentary enrichment and lasting prosperity. Over decades of studying men and women who have left marks on the world, I have learned that true wealth is not measured solely by what you accumulate, but by what you leave behind when you are no longer here. I've seen people who built empires, but after their departure left only possessions that faded away with time. And I have seen others who may not have been the richest, but whose names remain alive because they impacted lives, inspired generations, and created something that cannot be bought, a legacy. This is the essence of this part of the psalm, prosperity that endures. Kindness and mercy are not merely moral qualities. They are forces that, when genuinely lived, create a trail that surpasses one's very existence. When you live with a purpose greater than yourself, your actions begin to echo beyond your physical presence. And interestingly, the more you focus on creating impact, the more resources, connections, and opportunities seem to flow to you. I recall a businessman I met in the United States near the end of his life. He had built a considerable fortune, but did not speak proudly of the sums. He spoke of the hospitals he helped to found, the scholarships he offered to young people from low-income families, the families who had a dignified life because he chose to invest in them. Money goes away, he told me, but the lives you transform keep speaking of you even when you cannot speak for yourself. Studies show that people who live with a clear purpose, aimed at serving and contributing, report higher levels of satisfaction and well-being, regardless of income. Gallup has identified that individuals with this mindset not only feel more fulfilled, but also tend to have more consistent careers and stronger relationships. This happens because those who live for something greater than their own ego are not easily shaken by external fluctuations. They have deep roots. The verse says that kindness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. This speaks of constancy, and constancy is an indispensable element for building a legacy. Anyone can have a single act of generosity or compassion, but living every day aligned with these principles requires discipline, character, and a long-term vision. It is exactly the opposite of living in pursuit of immediate gratification. It is planting knowing that you might not be the one to reap everything you have sown. When I think about this truth, I realize that many are chasing things that, even if they achieve them, will not last. Markets change, fashions pass, technology ages, but principles do not age. Values do not lose their validity. Integrity never goes out of style. And that is why, at the end of a life guided by these values, you may dwell, as the Psalm says, in the house of the Lord for long days. This house is also a state of mind, peace, inner security, and the awareness that your life was lived with meaning. Perhaps today you are spending all your energy accumulating, achieving, and conquering. But if everything you gain leaves no trace beyond yourself, then when you leave, everything goes away with you. True prosperity is that which remains alive in history, in the hearts and minds of those who were touched by it. And deep down, this is the greatest inheritance anyone can leave. The certainty that they lived not just for themselves, but to build something that lasts far beyond their own time. If there is one thing you need to take from all we have discussed here, it is that real prosperity begins in the mind and is confirmed in your daily actions. It is not luck, it is not chance, it is decision and constancy. Abundance is not a prize for a few. It is a natural consequence for those who align faith, clarity, courage, and purpose. And now, if you want to continue this journey and take another step in your evolution of wisdom, becoming 1% better than you are now, the next video appearing on your screen will deepen this path even further. In it, we will expand these principles and apply them practically so that you can see tangible results in your life. If this content has made sense to you, please consider supporting the channel with a thank you below. And if you wish to become part of our community, subscribe to gain priority access to the upcoming videos. This helps us continue producing high-value content for your transformation. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.